Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 1999's Monster Rancher 2, the monster raising simulator that allowed players to receive new monsters by putting various other discs into their console.
Following that is a sequel 26 years in the making, taking over the lineage of Sega's trilogy of influential beat-em-ups from the 90s, 2020's Streets of Rage 4. Not too much in common between Monster Rancher 2 and Streets of Rage 4, but they are numbered sequels, and they have different franchise titles in Japan than they do in the rest of the world. So that's interesting. I didn't know that about either game, honestly.
I think I realized that about Monster Rancher. I had no idea Streets of Rage was called something else in Japan. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to learn what those names are if you're listening at home. We'll tell you about that in the sections for those games. Joe, it's been a little bit since we've recorded last. How are you doing? What are you playing?
I have been doing all right. I didn't have time to play much last week because I was dying all week, super busy. So that was super fun. But when I did have a chance to play before that, I was continuing Haunting Ground, and I got to the point where, I want to see the entirety of this game, and I'm too lazy to go pull up a long play, but also this game's not very good. So
yes.
That's where action replay codes come in handy. I've made myself invincible, and that's how we're going to do it now. One of the main gimmicks of Haunting Ground is that there's always a pursuer character that is looking for Mr. X style all the time, always. And they're super hard to avoid, and you can barely fight them. So I activated a cheat that lets me turn invisible if I stand still and they can't find me.
Oh, that's awesome. Yay, action replay.
Yeah, I fixed the game. But other than that, Steam Next Fest starts today at time of recording. At time of release, it's still going. Bunch of demos on Steam. Obviously, I haven't played any yet because it starts today. Except that's a lie. I did play one. I was given early access to a demo of a game called Spirit Tea. That's all one word, Spiritea. It's basically, what if Stardew Valley was spirited away instead? So instead of having a farm to take care of, you are managing a bathhouse for the spirits in a rural Japanese town.
Oh, interesting.
It was very neat. I really, really liked what I played. So that's the demo that I can recommend right now. If you're listening, go check it out.
Very cool. Yeah, always interesting to see what kind of demos are on offer this time of year and throughout the year, honestly, with Steam Next Fest. I have been playing Mass Effect 3 because looking over the games I had installed, I'm like, oh, right, I never did finish the Mass Effect Legendary Edition Remaster Trilogy with my Obama Shepherd as a paragon, and just jumped into Mass Effect 3, and that's some good video game comfort food. It's interesting to see how games have changed or not changed since then for a game made originally in 2012 or, over 10 years ago. And I'm also doing some remote play with it, which is also fun. Drives me crazy how you cannot network stream gameplay off of an Xbox Series X and play it on an Xbox One or an Xbox One X. It has to be either on your phone or it has to be on your PC. Those are the options. It's phone or PC. You can't stream stuff off your Series X to another Xbox One console. And that's bananas, I think. If anyone knows how to make that work, let me know. But I'm flummoxed. But hey, using a backbone on iOS to play on the Xbox app there through remote play, it's fun. It works for Mass Effect 3, and I like it.
I've never tried remote play. I tried cloud play once with Game Pass. I played Banjo-Kazooie for about, let's say, 2 minutes and realized that I didn't want to do this anymore.
I had a bad time playing Celeste with that. Yeah, uh-huh.
Oh, God. Ooh. Yeah, no, that does not sound fun.
Certain games that can work with cloud play. The technology is getting better, so it'll get there. They just announced the cloud streaming is being part of the Samsung Gaming Hub on Samsung TV, so they're working on some partnerships there. Speaking of announcements, it's not E3 time, and so you have different presentations. The Keighley Fest of Summer Games Fest Live. You have Microsoft and Bethesda doing their big show. Too many news headlines to talk about if we went through composer follow-up news. So instead, Joe, let's have a little conversation of how is not E3 treating us? What are some of our big takeaways from the show so far?
Whoever sets up the slate of what's going to be shown off at these shows needs to look up the word variety because with the Summer Games Fest, there were so many games that were basically, I played Dead Space and liked it and want to play Dead Space, including the game being made by the Dead Space people.
And that's not even counting EA's Dead Space remake.
Yeah, and then you have the Wholesome Games Direct where it's like, how many farming sims do we need? How many do we need in this world? I am fully supportive of the idea that you should make what you want to make. Don't let me stop you. But oh my God, if you're putting together one of these presentations, please, for the love of God, make sure you're not showing the same genre over and over and over and over and over again.
Oh, and it's right in the same section of the show, too. It's all back to back to back. It's crazy. Space it out. Honestly, wow. So yeah, that's definitely something to point out for sure. And that Summer Game Fest, I know Jeff Keighley was tempering expectations too, but when The Last of Us remake, now The Last of Us Part 1, is your big final announcement, and then it gets leaked by PlayStation, it not only takes the wind out of your sails, but you didn't have all that much, really, I think, to show. So that was interesting to see. For Xbox, had some good announcements there, and they're really showing how when they have all these companies purchased, especially when Activision Blizzard becomes part of that umbrella when the deal goes through, to have, Overwatch 2 big promotion, because that's going to enter early access on October 4th. And then we can throw in Diablo 4 in there as well. I mean, not to mention when eventually Call of Duty is going to be a part of that once the PlayStation deal wraps up. And then you've got Kojima working on some cloud-based game. The Persona 3 Portable, 4 Golden, 5 Royal announcements because Game Pass money, you can do it to PC, and then they're like, the next day it's like, it's going to come to PS5 and Steam as well, but what about Switch? I mean, it's a wild time.
My favorite thing to come out of the Persona announcements was that meme of SpongeBob walking up to driving school. Hey, I'm next. Hey, I doubt it. I don't know whether to hope anymore.
Also just wild how it's a game called Persona 3 Portable, and it's like, but it's on
not
Xbox.
Be on the portable thing.
I mean, I guess on Steam Deck if you're gonna be doing that, but not on Switch yet. So there is that. For a Nintendo Direct, news of how a couple weeks ago was like, it might be on the 15th because we're misreading what a video game embargo means. A video game writer and a content creator now says it's the 29th. Yeah, we meant the 29th all along. Like, it's getting a little weird and desperate from people trying to be ahead of the story.
Look, I'd love for it to be on Wednesday, but it's not. Like, everything's pointing to it not being that. Maybe we'll be wrong. Who knows? But yeah, that's been one specific creator has been very I saw GameSpot write an article about the leak that they had presented today as if it was credible, which is sad. But yeah, in terms of like anything that I liked seeing shown off, I really liked what I saw of Resident Evil 4, the remake. That's coming out.
Look at us being on the ball too. Last episode talking about like Capcom might be there, Street Fighter 6, Resident Evil.
And hell, in half an hour at time of recording, we're going to learn more about Resident Evil 4 because Capcom's doing their own thing in Street Fighter 6 too. So, not that we don't already know everything about Street Fighter 6, considering the entire roster leaked like a day after that initial trailer.
Yeah, oops. Also, shouts out to Hollow Knight Silksong getting shown at the Xbox show. Yeah.
I did not expect that, but they're saying that means it's coming out within the next 12 months. So, hey, fingers crossed.
Game Pass day one, hopefully more music from Christopher Larkin. My favorite trailer of the whole thing was the Plucky Squire that was shown at DeVader's show, and that's James Turner, who was like an art director over at Game Freak for the recent Pokemon games, kind of spun off, made his new studio with some friends, and they're putting this really interesting looking game together. It gives me big Chicory vibes, so I can only hope Lana Rain's phone is blowing up with offers to score that game, because that'd be fantastic.
And otherwise, the only other game I can think of that really jumped out at me was one from the Wholesome Direct. It's called Mika and the Witch's Mountain, and it literally looks like, hey, we made Kiki's Delivery Service into a video game.
Wow.
Have fun. You're a witch, and you live in a seaside town who's delivering stuff to people. Like, it's just the movie.
Yeah, that's it entirely. Oh my gosh, wow. So yeah, some good stuff to watch. I feel like it is kind of a down year because of pandemic still continuing and affecting game studios and a lot of projects being pushed to 2023. But yeah, it's going to be interesting when the ESA tries to make E3 a physical presence next year.
In 2023, they'll be back stronger than ever.
Maybe not doxing journalists this time.
They won't, everybody. E3 is dead. They won't. The ESA is screwed. They've done it to themselves.
Let's talk about some VGM Hurdle, though. It's been a while since we've played this spin-off of the different Wordle Hurdle varieties, so we're going to try to guess a video game music track, at first within 1 second, then incrementing durations if we can't guess it until then. So far on the show, we've been able to guess it all in 1 second, so I don't know if that's going to change. I've been having some struggles lately with some of these tracks.
The past three have been games I've never played.
Yeah. So we'll see. Joey, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Let's try to guess this video game track. Oh, it sounds like it's from Scott Pilgrim. Sounds kind of Anamanaguchi.
Kinda.
I wonder if we type in... Oh, there's a lot of Anamanaguchi tracks. Oh my gosh, you type in Scott, there's like 6 tracks there. I would guess out of these options, I would say it's the world map. What do you think? It's been a long time since we've talked about this game's soundtrack.
I'm not sure.
Or is it the shop? Man. I feel like it's one of those interstitial kind of tracks and not like a level tune.
Oh yeah, it doesn't sound like it's an action sort of song. I think you're probably onto something with it being one of those two, but I don't personally recognize it myself.
What should we go with, the map or the shop? I'm kind of leaning towards shop the more I think about it.
Yeah, the first second sounds very shoppish.
Okay, let's try Cheap Shop. And there that's what it is. Look at that. Well done. Yay, teamwork. We keep the 1 second streak intact. That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting how we can... Because that was not a lot to go from, honestly. But go us.
It's still better than that one. I don't remember what the song was, but the first second was nothing.
Oh, yeah. So. Or like it was like one little drum hit.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to play, certainly VGM-hurdle.glitch.me. new video game song every day. We really appreciate whoever keeps this up and running.
All right, let's talk about a game. I've said in the past, like, oh, I know nothing about this game series and don't feel qualified to talk about it. This is the strongest it's ever been or ever will be, because we're talking about Monster Rancher 2. I don't know anything about Monster Rancher. I mean, I do now, obviously, a little bit, because I did research, but I don't even think I'd ever seen gameplay of a Monster Rancher game. We were talking before the show about how, like, I only know Monster Rancher existed because I saw a commercial for the anime one time, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I grew up in the late 90s with 4Kids and Foxbox and all those things.
Yeah, that's the only reason I know that Monster Rancher exists. It's one of those series where, like, you look into it and it's like, this game has, like, a fan base? There's 14 of them?
What?
There's 14 Monster Rancher games.
That's insane.
So, Monster Rancher 2 was released for the PlayStation on February 25th, 1999 in Japan, August 31st, 1999 in North America, and October 20th, 2000 in Europe. So once again, Europe had to wait over a year, to get this game.
And as we mentioned at the top of the show, it's called something different in Japan.
It is. It is called Monster Farm in Japan, but it is also called something slightly different in Europe, because Europe didn't get the original Monster Rancher game. So in Europe, Monster Rancher 2 is just called Monster Rancher.
Aha! So Monster Rancher 2, Monster Rancher, and Monster Farm 2.
So it got the clock tower treatment in Europe. So yeah, it's got 2 alternate names. Monster Rancher 2 would actually get a PSN release in Japan only in 2014. And then Japan also exclusively got an Android release in 2020. But then worldwide, if you want to play it now, it actually was released in a bundle with the first Monster Rancher game on Switch and PC last year in 2021. So you can currently play it there.
Interesting. As we get to talking about the mechanics, it makes me wonder how that's all carried over.
It sounds like a hell of a slapdash solution. I can answer that question, actually. So it was developed and published by Tecmo. And as one might expect, it is the second game in the Monster Rancher franchise. I know, big shock. So what is Monster Rancher? Monster Rancher is a monster breeding, battling, and raising simulation game that, as far as I can tell, was one of the many IPs that were trying to capitalize on how a certain game series called Pokemon had sort of sparked a fever on Earth at that point, with Pokemon Green having come out in 96. But as far as I can tell, in terms of gameplay, it's much more fitting to compare it to Digimon. It's much closer to that than it is to Pokemon, but it still is in the same sort of realm of you have monsters, you train them to fight, you do a tournament. The last battles that you do in these tournaments are called the Major Four. They weren't even trying to hide it. So it's one of the more successful IPs that did this. Like I said, it got 14 games, and that's more than most other Pokemon copycat franchises got. Demi Kids didn't get that many. Remember Demi Kids? Nobody remembers Demi Kids. That was Atlas's attempt at making Pokemon SMT.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
I think they were GBA games. So what set Monster Rancher apart was that its main method of getting these monsters, which is the only other thing I knew about Monster Rancher before this, because it is really, really neat. So yeah, you can get monsters in-game from like completing quests or finding them within the game, but there was a more interesting method of doing so. you could take the game disc out of the PS1 and then put in a different disc, whether it be another PlayStation game or a music album or even, I think, other disc-based things would work as well. I don't know if DVDs worked. I don't even know if DVDs were like a common thing in 99. I don't think they were.
No, probably not, yeah.
Yeah, it was mostly like music CDs and other PlayStation games were where you were going to get these. And it would take the metadata of that CD and it would generate a monster out of it. And that's how you got monsters. In order to create specific types of monsters using this method, you actually had to still unlock them in the game. So you couldn't get every type of monster from the start. But that's kind of the bread and butter of the original Monster Rancher games, and most of them still work like that. Now, you asked how the HD pairing works with that. Apparently, it's just a list of CDs. They just imported a list into the game, and you can select from it.
Oh.
I don't know how else they do it, to be fair, but it's not nearly as neat.
But I think at the time, I mean, that's a genius way to, make use of all this media that you'd have floating around. I don't think it's anything that kids growing up today can totally envision because it's all digital. It's instant access all the time, but that's brilliant. I wonder if something like an America Online demo disc would create a kind of monster. Like, yeah, gotta imagine also, computer games, like CDs there,
that's true,
ROMs
yeah.
from other game consoles. Like what would it's really interesting to think about. It's a clever idea, but yeah, I guess that is one way to adapt it nowadays.
I know it did mention that in some cases you would get a special monster from specific discs. So like one of Tecmo's other games, if you put it in there, it would give you a monster that was the villain of that game. Or my favorite one was Wikipedia specifically mentioned that if you put in a Christmas album, you would sometimes get a Santa type monster.
Yes.
Which is great. I don't know what that means. I assume it's just Santa Claus. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting way of doing things. It reminds me of, you remember those toys that were like, oh, you take it to the grocery store and you scan barcodes and it makes warriors out of that or monsters out of the barcodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I never had any of them because they sounded stupid. And even as a kid, I knew they sounded stupid.
But it's like prime opportunities for promotion, like if it took off and was successful.
Yeah, pretty much. So it reminds me a lot about that, but, better. So after you have this monster, you can do all sorts of stuff with them, including combine them into new monsters. But for the most part, what you do with these monsters is you train them to take part in battle tournaments, either by having them perform chores around your ranch or sending them off to various experts to train with and learn specific skills. The goal of the game is to train up your monster to be strong enough to win battle tournaments and climb its way up the ranks until it has reached S-Class and can go on to battle the Major 4. But the clock is ticking on that because, unlike Pokemon, monsters can retire from battle, but they can also straight up just die.
What?
They can die of old age.
Oh.
And I talked to one of our mutual friends, who is the only human being I know on this earth that's played a Monster Rancher game. And he described it as the marketing and the box doesn't mention anything about how the monsters can die. And so when you're a first-time player and you don't know what you're doing, it blindsides you when your monster just dies.
It's horrifying, and it reminds me of there was a news article that just came out that talked about Pokemon and how the original idea was that like if you lost battles, like trainers could claim your Pokemon.
Oh God!
And like they decided like maybe that's too heartbreaking, so let's not do that. But like it sounds like with Monster Farm, Monster Rancher, they kind of just went cutthroat, huh?
I would have cried if they kept that in the game.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I mean, I probably would have cried if I played this game and my monster died too, but who knows? Yeah, that's basically the gist of Monster Rancher. I don't know what else to say about it, so I guess this is where I will ask, hey, what are our experiences with Monster Rancher 2, or more realistically, Monster Rancher the franchise?
I feel like, for me, for the longest time, as I said, like, growing up with afternoon cartoons, weekend cartoons, oh, there's this show, Monster Rancher, and it's got this yellow eyeball with a big toothy mouth. Monster Rancher. Didn't realize it was from a video game, especially not growing up with an original PlayStation. But, you know, as you grow up and you become more interested in games, you learn about this generally being a thing. And I feel like I had heard the whole, CD-ROM adds more monsters thing, but I guess hadn't never really looked into it. Don't know the limitations of it. Don't know a whole lot about it. Certainly didn't play it. And that's, someone who was big into Pokemon and Digimon and the like at the time.
So, I don't think I've ever played any of the Pokemon sort of competitors ever. Not even Digimon. I've never played a Digimon game in my life. I didn't watch the anime. I didn't watch the movies. Just wasn't a Digimon person. And Monster Rancher is no different. Like you, I saw a commercial at some point for the anime. I remember the yellow eye tooth man who is terrifying on all of the box arts. Just all of them. It's grotesque. His name is apparently Suezo. So do with that what you will.
Yeah, I don't know if they had the naming down like they did with Pikachu.
I don't think they did either, honestly. But I had heard through secondhand experiences about like the CD thing and all that. But other than that, like I said, until yesterday, I had never even seen gameplay of a Monster Rancher game. I don't even know if I can say I've seen gameplay of a Monster Rancher game now. Can I qualify that? I don't know.
Yeah, you tell me Monster Rancher Battle, I have no idea what that looks like or plays like.
It's... I don't think I do either, to be perfectly honest with you. But I do know that when the HD remasters came out, people were pretty excited about them. So I do know that this game does have kind of a cult following. And like I said, 14 games. You don't make 14 games if nobody's buying them. Unless you're like a shovelware developer, but I don't think you can call Tecmo that, to be fair. And it generally comes down to that. I am so far removed from Monster Rancher that I don't know what else to say. And sadly, research didn't help with that, because there's no information on either this or the original Monster Hunter. I knew I was going to do it once.
I didn't even think about that, but you know what?
I knew
Fair.
at least once.
Is Monster Hunter getting to 14 games? It kind of feels like that.
I think it might be past 14 games, but I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything about the development of either of those games, which is kind of a bummer because I want to know how they came up with the CD-ROM thing. And I couldn't find any information on that. Honestly, all I could really find was that it reviewed pretty well when it originally came out. The PS1 version is sitting at an 83 on Metacritic. That puts it just slightly lower than Monster Rancher 1. Criticisms were mainly aimed for 2 at how few risks the new game takes. It apparently is very, very safe and close to the original while only tweaking a few things that they knew worked and not really making any major changes or introducing anything super big that wasn't in the original game. And for a lot of people, that was like, well, I mean, yeah, it's a little bit better, but I've played Monster Rancher 1. I wanted something new.
How close was the turnaround on the sequel?
The original Monster Rancher came out in 1997, so it was 2 years between that release and this release.
Okay. I almost would have expected like a year turnaround if they were just keeping it pretty bare bones and similar.
Yeah, I think that would be safe to assume, but I mean, who knows? I don't think Tecmo was a massive name in games at that point. Maybe in Japan. I don't really know about that, but I know it probably wasn't here, to be fair. And obviously nowadays they're Koei Tecmo and they're a bit of a bigger name, but, you know. The re-release, though, did not fare as well. Currently, the Metacritic for Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX is a 70 on Switch, so not terrible, and a 61 on PC. So most of those criticisms were like, yeah, they're still the games that were good on the PS1, but that was on the PS1 22 years ago. So they're very dated, apparently. But for people that played them as kids, like, they're perfect. They're apparently very good ports overall, outside of how they had to go around the CD-ROM thing. So take from that what you will. Like I said, the series would continue from Monster Rancher 2 with 11 more games spanning across the PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, DS, and mobile. The series went dormant in 2011 after the release of the mobile title My Monster Rancher. It is still technically dormant. I don't know if the HD remasters in 2021 count as making it no longer a dead franchise, but it has not gotten a new game in about 10 years at this point, over 10 years. So, you know, who knows, maybe one day there'll be a new one, but that's not looking super likely. There is also, as mentioned a couple of times, a 73 episode anime.
That many episodes?
73, baby.
Wow.
That's way longer than I expected, to be perfectly honest. Here in the US, it aired on Fox Kids, on their Kids block, which is where I believe also you could see Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon might have been part of that at some point. There were a couple other Sonic X, I think.
So, if memory serves correctly, so Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were part of the Kids WB block. There,
right, yeah.
The Warner Brothers. Digimon was on the Fox lineup, and I think that's also where Sonic ended up. I think you're right there.
Yeah, I think that was right. That might be where Metabots were.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of, like, remembering, like, there's got to be, like, what, a Sporkle trivia, something like that. Name the Kids WB shows. Mucha Lucha.
I forgot about Mucha Lucha's existence until literally just now.
What's the one with Omi and Kimiko and Clay and
Shaolin Showdown?
Shaolin Showdown, baby.
Yeah,
yes.
That show was good.
So, you know, I was definitely more on the Kids WB side of things, but yeah, Fox had some good stuff. That's where, like, the TMNT cartoons at the time showed up there as well. So yeah,
and I'm pretty sure that anime is the only reason I knew Monster Rancher existed. Same with Suezo, the mascot, apparently. I'm serious, like, go look up all the box art for these games. He's on every single one, and he looks terrifying.
Oh, yeah, how did that become the mascot?
It's upsetting to look at.
Human teeth. If we thought, like, Sonic was a weird design, human teeth on Suezo.
Human teeth in his mouth is always, like, wide open, like he's screaming. It's horrifying. So the composer for Monster Rancher 2 is somebody by the name of Yutaka Fujishima, and that is all of the information I can give you on them, because I couldn't find anything. There's a voice actor apparently named Yutaka Fujishima. I think I also found, like, an activist named Yutaka Fujishima. The only real information I could find on her was a VGMDB page that had 3 albums on it. She doesn't even have a Moby Games page.
Oh, weird.
It's that dire. So the 3 albums that VGMDB mentioned that she was a composer on being Tecmo's Deception, Invitation to Darkness. Yes, the studio name is part of that title. I don't know why. The original Dead or Alive, and then Monster Rancher 2. That's it. It also listed Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX, but that's just because Monster Rancher 2.
Yes, carrying over, yep.
And that's literally all I have for you about this game. I don't have any historical development research. I mean, that checks out if I can't even find any information on the composer at all. She might still be with Tecmo?
I would hope so. I hope she's doing well. That's like kind of upsetting when like the last time they're credited with anything is like the early 2000s or the late 90s.
Yeah, and maybe it's just that she's worked on games that haven't gotten official soundtrack releases, but as far as I can tell, she has not worked on a game since 1999. And that's unfortunate. Because the soundtrack is actually pretty good, all things considered, especially for a PS1 soundtrack. And let's get in and listen to some of that with our 5 critical tracks. We're going to start with critical track number 1. This is Ranch Winter. So much like Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon, there is a different theme for the ranch depending on what season it is. And as you might have guessed, this is the theme that plays in the winter. It was a toss-up between this and spring. I liked both of those quite a bit, but this one kind of won over. It's a lot different than I'm used to winter sounding in games like this, because usually... Like, take Stardew, for example. Winter sounds kinda... sad? Because, I mean, everything's dead. You can't do anything. You can't do any farming. But there's a lot more sort of bouncy happiness in a lot of ways to this one. It's still a little more low-key than the other 3 seasons, but it's a lot different from what I'm used to winter themes sounding like in this kind of game.
Yeah, later in the piece, you get some of like the sleigh bells kind of coming in. I feel like that kind of supports the winter sound. But I also feel like there's definitely also some inspiration maybe from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Like, how do we get a ranch kind of piece? It kind of gives me a Lon Lon Ranch vibes as well. You get the violin MIDI kind of doing a simple little melody, and then it's supported. But yeah, the instrumentation later in the piece is actually really nice.
It does sound kind of like a Pokemon town, like a modern Pokemon town.
Oh, yeah, that's a good comparison point too. Yeah.
Like GBA era Pokemon town specifically. Which, hey, maybe the copying went both ways. Who knows? As far as I could tell, these games were a lot more popular in Japan than they were here. Because, of course, they were. For critical track number 2, remember when I said that your monster could die? This is Hospitalization/Runaway. This song is so dire for what is on its face like a nice, charming monster raising simulator. I take the fact that Runaway is part of this song's title to mean that they can also run away, but I didn't find any mention of that in any of the things that I read.
Oh my god, Scar players more. Scar the children playing. Oh.
But your monster can get injured and go to the hospital. Hence the hospitalization. And so this song, it's so dire. It feels like the crisis music that would play in like a JRPG when the villain, like that scene in every JRPG where you try to take on the villain too early and they kick your ass and you have to like get out of there quick, or you're learning about what their plan is for the first time. That's what it feels like. And it's a song about your monster going to the hospital.
I mean, I'm just sitting here listening to it thinking, at least it supports the mood of the moment properly, because wow. But also I would not have expected this kind of heavy, dark sort of sounding piece to come from this kind of game. Especially one where the logo has this toothy monster cyclops.
Doing like this chuckle.
Oh, it's so funny.
With this weird stub body.
I can die.
I can die. Everything is mortal and will one day rot away. Hey kids, let me tell you about death. Can you imagine how many talks this probably led to with parents?
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Let's get a little bit more cheery here with critical track number 3. This is Expedition.
Oh, thank God it's more positive.
I think this might be my favorite song that I heard. It feels very adventurous, which I guess if this is the music that plays when you go out on an expedition, that fits. You're going on an adventure, essentially. And I really, really dig that sort of vibe. I know I keep comparing it to other games and other genres. I don't know what else to do. I'm sorry, everybody. But it reminds me of an airship theme from Final Fantasy. Has a lot of similar vibes to that. But yeah, no, this is a really fun track, especially after the tonal whiplash that was Hospitalization.
Yeah, I feel like it's that kind of adventure sounding mixed with some maybe like a farming simulator, like a Harvest Moon kind of feel.
I wonder if this is what Rune Factory sounds like. I've never played a Rune Factory game.
Oh, I wonder. That's really interesting to think about. I just feel like the instrumentation here kind of feels like that, if I had to guess. Also, it looks like there are other composers listed for possibly other music credits, including Ayako Toyoda, Masaaki Udagawa, and Saki Ishii. So possible other et al. Names. You don't know who to assign each track to, but there you go.
I didn't scroll down to see those names. That's the only place on Wikipedia it is only listed as Yutaka Fujishima.
Well, then you know what? Who knows if that's accurate or not? The internet is a wild and crazy place.
All right, let's get to critical track number 4. The next two are battle themes that really jumped out at me. First one being Official Battle Grade A through S. So obviously these are the highest ranks you can get through, so these are the most stakes that you have for the whole thing. This sounds so JRPG, it is insane, but it also, I think it's the sound font the sound font is so similar to Pokemon Stadium.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's a really weird combination in my mind.
Not only that, but for a totally other game and genre and all that.
Yeah.
I hear this and I think Star Fox 64.
Oh, yeah, I could hear that too, 100%. And I think that just means it fits super well for combat. It's this very, very tense, but also triumphant piece. It's got the brass section there. It's got the woodwinds in it. It definitely does feel like it's sort of pushing you on, like, yeah, you can do it. And I think that's good. It's a very, very good battle theme.
Yeah, definitely shout out to the MIDIs used here. I feel like when we've highlighted some PlayStation games, some of their sounds are a little lacking. And so I think that if we can compare it favorably to some Nintendo 64 games, that speaks pretty well to it for the time.
Yeah, I think as much as I love the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack, those are some rough MIDIs. And I do like that these are much improved from that. In fact, these might actually be some of the better MIDIs I've ever heard out of a PS1 game, I'll be real.
Mm-hmm.
So props for that. And of course, critical check number 5 is Official Battle Major 4. No, legit, they just called them the Major 4. I wonder what they could possibly be based on or inspired by.
Let's start rummaging through our adjectives and get through that thesaurus.
I think this is my favorite of the battle themes. It's not just here because it is like the final battles. I do think that this is legitimately the best battle theme. Granted, I do want to give a shout out to, and this was also mentioned by our friends and Jester, he really likes the E-Rank battle theme, which I think was almost on this list as well, to be fair. But this one, I think, just has that feeling of like, I don't know if I'd say it's tense. It has moments of tension in it, but a lot of it is just like, yeah, you did it, you're here, let's do this. And again, it sounds very Pokemon Stadium-ish. In a lot of ways, especially the sort of instrumentation, and that's really neat on a PS1 still.
The dramatics are definitely played up, but I also kind of take back what I said. The trumpet here is a little messy and all over the place.
It's just trumpets. Trumpet MIDIs are bad even today.
But, like, you could go with, like, a triumphant fanfare and have it be simple but also powerful. But this is like, we're here, so let's make it crazy. Like, okay, all right, got it. You're complex, so therefore you're better. I don't know.
That's how they got to make sure that you know that you are at the top, baby. Yeah. I shouldn't be allowed to talk about this game. So for tracks on the cutting room floor, I got 2. The first one is Ima. As far as I can tell, this is one of the favorites, which is really weird because in the comments and from our friend, like, this only plays when you register your name.
Weird.
That's the only time this song plays ever. Also, as far as I can tell, the name comes from the continent in the first game in some fashion, though I couldn't find details on that, because as far as I could tell, like, the first game's continent is called Fatima, or something similar to that. So I guess that's a thing. I don't know. I kind of really like this song because I think it has this nice farm game energy. I can picture hearing this as a kid and not realizing that I'm going into a game that is going to ruin my life when my favorite monster dies.
I'm getting weird flashbacks like I've heard this before, but I wonder if it's almost like from like video game music quizzes or something like that. That's so weird that this is apparently a favorite and it has that strange moment it takes place in the game, huh?
Yeah, most of the YouTube comments are something along the lines of, this song's so good, I can't believe it only plays for like 10 seconds at the beginning of the game. And it's a 2-minute piece. It's a 2-minute loop that's on this YouTube channel. So, who knows? Let's bring it back down, shall we, with Cutting Group Floor track number 2. This is Requiem. So just from hearing it, Peter, I want you to guess, where does this play? What's happening when this plays?
One of your best friends that you've spent all this time and effort into has departed this world, and your childlike soul is shattered.
Close. It plays during the funeral. Your monster gets a funeral.
Oh my god! Make it worse, why don't you?
When I asked Zen about it, he said even a good player needs to hear this track at least 2 or 3 times to unlock all the monsters. I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Oh no. Is there like some requirements to unlock? Oh no. Like you gotta, I don't even want to guess.
But this doesn't even sound like a funeral. It's just sinister. This sounds evil. Like the game is guilting you for having killed this monster.
Oh, yeah. Or like the monster's ghost is going to come out and wreak havoc on the living.
I think that could actually happen. I think you could actually get a ghost style. That's why it takes them to unlock. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I read about how you could, if you give a monster a funeral, it can come back as a ghost type monster.
Ah. Okay.
So to get some monsters, you have to kill your monster. It's just strategy.
Not traumatizing at all.
What is this franchise? So what will I never forget about Monster Rancher 2? This sounds like a wild series that it's probably for the best I did not get into as a child.
Yeah, I feel like my parents would have not liked this being a part of the house I grew up in. I feel like Pokemon and even Digimon was pushing it, but honestly, Pokemon for them fainting sold that franchise a long way. I feel like for adults, especially say what you will about the different religious groups in the United States. But yeah, once you start dealing with like death and ghosts and I mean, not that there isn't that in Pokemon. We look at Pokemon Tower and Lavender Town, etc. But for a core mechanic, woof.
I wish I was a fly on the wall for the first kid to discover that your monster can die. Again, I was told this was not mentioned in the marketing at all. You found out when your monster died. That's how you learned. Which, I can respect that. Kids need to learn lessons. And what better way to learn lessons than by killing Suezo? So for our transition, we like to highlight a fan remix, a fan cover. I couldn't find a lot of them for this game, actually. In fact, I found a grand total of 2. And I'll be honest, the first one I found wasn't great. But I am glad that I found this one because I do think this one works out really well. This is the Ranch Summer theme done fully using an ocarina. by YouTuber Abe Lim, ABE space LIM. And I think it translates really, really well to this instrument. And I think he did a great job. And you should give it a listen. And we will be right back.
All right, we checked back in on the Capcom showcase, and it looks like they just announced Resident Evil Village DLC, so that kind of shows you the timing of when we're recording. Also, Dragon's Dogma fans are feeling pain, so.
I feel you all. I'm a fan of Silent Hill. Don't worry. I got you. I understand.
Uh-huh. As much as Itsuno wants to make a new game, let's be honest, he maybe is, but today is not that day. Let's talk about Streets of Rage 4. First time talking about Streets of Rage in general on this show, I think. Did you know, Joe, that the franchise is called Bare Knuckle in Japan?
I very much did not know that, mainly because Streets of Rage already sounds like a very Japanese game title.
Oh, 100%. So I didn't think twice when it was, that's obviously what the title is, but nope, Bare Knuckle. So it's a series that it was a trilogy of beat-em-up games, side-scrolling beat-em-ups, for Sega Genesis and Mega Drive, of course, that all being the same thing. And these games released in 1991, 1992, and 1994. They were influential games at the time. I mean, a lot of beat-em-up games made at the time, but Streets of Rage was pretty king among them, especially with their soundtracks composed by Yuzo Koshiro, a name that we have mentioned many a time on this show. And so when you're talking about a follow-up sequel that is 26 years in the making, Streets of Rage 4 released for PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Switch on April 30th, 2020. Yes, so within the first couple months of the pandemic. There's a Stadia version. Remember Google Stadia? Well, Google's trying to forget it more and more each day. A Stadia version launched on July 15th, 2021. And a mobile port of Streets of Rage 4 for iOS and Android just recently launched on May 24th, 2022. Of course, the game is known as Bare Knuckle 4 and IV, not numeral 4. It's Bare Knuckle IV in Japan.
They tried to give me an IV in my knuckles once. It didn't work out.
Yeah, and that's rubbed it bare, I suppose. I don't know. So the game is developed by Dotemu, Lizard Cube, and Guard Crush Games. It is published by Dotemu. And Streets of Rage 4 is also a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. Players advance from left to right on each stage, defeating enemies as they go by hitting them with combos, juggling them, etc. Punches and kicks. Keep them going. Keep those combos going. Players can pick up healing items and weapons. And at the end of each stage, the player must face the boss of the stage. Then after that, the player is graded based on how well they did. How much damage did they take? How much time did it take? Etc. As far as I know, using special moves in previous Streets of Rage games would give you powerful attacks while sacrificing some of your health bar. And then you kind of balance that with the items that you heal with during the stage and go through and progress that way. But in this game, you can recover some of that sacrificed health by following the special attack up with successive attacks and then also not getting hit. There are also star moves that exist, and they're very powerful, very limited use attacks that only replenish by finding star icon items in the stage. But like a good beat 'em up, especially these days, you can play online and with other players. So you can play with up to 4 players in co-op locally, and it's 2-player co-op online. as the text rolls to convey the story of Streets of Rage 4 at the beginning of the game. It says, quote, 10 years have passed since the fall of Mr. X and his syndicate. The city has been at peace. Until now. A new crime empire has arisen, corrupting everything good in the city. It is rumored to be led by Mr. X's own children, the Y twins. Former detectives Axel Stone and Blaze Fielding join forces with their old friend's daughter, Cherry Hunter, along with Floyd Uriah, an apprentice of the brilliant Dr. Zan. Together, these 4 vigilantes stand against the Y Syndicate on the Streets of Rage.
Dun, 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 dun.
Big question being, can you beat the Y twins and their syndicate? So, Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Streets of Rage 4?
So I'm pretty sure we've mentioned this during the River City Girls episode, probably during the Scott Pilgrim episode too. I'm not a big beat 'em up fan. I don't find them to be that exciting, though I have heard that Streets of Rage 4 is really, really good. I've also heard that it is really, really hard, meaning it's probably not for me. But I did get to play it a little bit at PAX East before the world shut down. That was kind of cool. And I got to ask the developers a few questions. That's how I found out that Yuzo Koshiro was not doing the soundtrack for the most part, which we'll get into that in a bit. But those worries were ill-founded, the worries that inspired, because I've heard the soundtrack, and it is absolutely fantastic top to bottom. And that's pretty much the extent of my experience with not only Streets of Rage 4, but the Streets of Rage franchise in general.
Oh, yeah. I have zero experience with the Streets of Rage series. And like you, I don't really play too many beat-em-ups, if ever. Just not that good at them. Also, they can get repetitive. I feel like I tried Battletoads, the new one, because I was like early days of Game Pass, and it was a quick play. And it kind of mixed up the gameplay, I think, enough to be pretty fun. But
if not for Megan McDuffie's soundtrack, I would not have played River City Girls or finished it even.
That's fair, honestly. But yeah, Streets of Rage 4 was part of our Best of 2020 top 10 episode, and I think it made number 7, if I recall correctly. So a really solid soundtrack, and one to bring to the show eventually, and it was one to challenge myself to learn more about, because I was curious. It was one I also had downloaded to my Xbox for a while because it was a Game Pass game. It is no longer a Game Pass game. As someone who is going to go back and play it as part of research for this episode to discover that it's no longer there, it is a prime example of play these games when they are on Game Pass and don't expect them to be around forever.
I want to say it left in like February. It hasn't been that long since it went away, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah. So it has not been that long. So definitely keep that in mind for Game Pass games that are out there right now. So the development of Streets of Rage 4 apparently happened when, upon completing the development on Wonder Boy: The Dragon's Trap, which I've heard really good things about that game. It's a 2017 remake of 1989's Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap. Lizard Cube artist Ben Fiquet wanted to make a remaster of the original Streets of Rage games, using the same kind of techniques that he did. However, the programmer of the Wonder Boy remake game, Omar Cornut, he had moved on to a personal project, so Fiquet and the publisher Dotemu approached Sega about creating a full sequel to Streets of Rage instead. And Sega agreed. They licensed the franchise to Dotemu, and production on the game began at the beginning of 2018, with the game being publicly announced that August. Guard Crush Games also was listed among the developers, and they co-developed the game because they all used a modified engine from Guard Crush's Streets of Fury game, which was a game that kind of took inspiration from it. There was a core development team of 5 members across the 3 companies, so a very a personal kind of low stakes project. And you know what? It worked out pretty well. They had some big aspirations though to kind of blend in other Sega franchises though. Joe Musashi from the Shinobi series was proposed as a playable character along with other Sega characters outside of the Streets of Rage games. But the idea was turned down by Sega of Japan. Oh my god, could you have imagined Kazuma Kiryu in Streets of Rage 4?
I mean, technically I can because they did make that.
Oh, right. They did that little weird spin-off title. Yeah, Streets of Kamurocho or whatever I think it was called.
I think that's what it was called. That game is nothing, apparently. Like, there's one level and it's just infinitely spawning enemies. But I probably actually would have played this game immediately if Kiryu was in it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that probably would have sold the game to me, like, alone.
And now for whatever reason, I'm just thinking of like Sonic in Streets of Rage. No, that wouldn't have worked at all. Each playable Streets of Rage 4 character has approximately 1,000 frames of animation. I'm trying to remember how that compares to something like Cuphead. That's a lot though. And the enemies have about 300 to 400 frames each. And there are a lot of enemies in this game. You gotta bring in a whole bunch of enemies to keep it being fresh and all that. So that's a lot of work. During the stages, the player can find hidden retro levels by hitting the breakable arcade machines with a taser gun. And these levels consist of just short fights against bosses from Streets of Rage 2. If you win the battle, the players will be awarded with a Power Star. But if the players die in this level, it won't trigger a game over. Instead, they'll be sent back to the normal level. And regardless of winning or losing, the players are sent back at full health. So it's worth trying at least. Streets of Rage 4 reviewed well, with Metacritic averages ranging from 82 on PS4 and Xbox One to 84 on PC and 87 on the Switch and iOS versions. The presentation, the soundtrack, and the beat-em-up gameplay was praised, but the online components struggled at launch, and a fair critique here, the gameplay was also seen as either beholden to or stuck in the 90s. Like, it's a great coat of paint on the gameplay for Streets of Rage and, very loyal to that franchise, but side-scrolling beat-em-ups are what they are, and they're definitely a genre that was king in the 90s and haven't done too much to kind of be new and fresh since then.
Yeah, it's a genre that sort of died with the SNES and the Genesis, which I know there are a lot of people that are really happy that it's gotten a resurgence as of late, like with this. You got River City Girls, Scott Pilgrim came back out, Battletoads, I guess, came back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are a lot of people that really like beat-em-ups, but it is a genre that was born for the arcades, and arcades are dead.
Yeah, yeah, you got the Simpsons, X-Men, like it was TMNT is coming back. That's another big beat 'em up, and that's kind of relevant, I guess, out this week is the TMNT Shredder's Revenge game. So more beat 'em ups there. So it is a fondly remembered genre, but it's not for everybody, and it's of a specific time. But still, Streets of Rage 4 sold over 2.5 million copies as of April 2021. That's pretty good. It was nominated for Best Action Game at the Game Awards, but it lost to Hades. I think that's the right call there. Surprisingly, no nominations from the DICE Awards or the BAFTAs, though. I'm a little surprised by that. I think that should have at least had some recognition, at least for the soundtrack. I mean, my goodness. Though 2020 was a pretty darn good year for games. The legacy of Streets of Rage 4, it had a DLC expansion made called Mr. X Nightmare, and it was released on July 15th, 2021. It adds 3 new playable characters, 1 new secret character, while previous characters received new moves, along with new weapon pickups, new enemies, and also exclusive brand new tracks by T. Lopes of Sonic Mania fame. So that's a good pairing there. Because the soundtrack of this game is primarily composed by Olivier Deriviere. And Olivier Deriviere was born on December 26, 1978 In France, he studied classical percussion by his parents enrolling him at a conservatory when he was 5. At the age of 8, Deriviere's mother bought him a synthesizer, which he used to write various short pieces, and then he took interest in game music after hearing the main menu theme for 1989's Shadow of the Beast, which led him to studying music more. He also worked with his friends in the demo scene in his teenage years, and so he's always really been an enthusiast of video games as an art form. And especially when he started to learn about music, like he really took a focus of wanting to be a video game music composer, like feels that there's more to do in this space than composing for film or TV. So he received training in harmony, counterpoint, and instrumentation at the Nice Conservatoire, and then also studied film scoring and jazz with a scholarship at the Berklee College of Music. He then made his debut in the game industry with the soundtrack for the 2004 survival horror game Obscure. But it was his work on the 2013 game Remember Me, and that was the first game that was made by Don't Nod Entertainment, that earned him recognition as a rising star in the video game composer space. It was a score that involved sampling and digitally processing already recorded live orchestra, as in that game, if you remember Me.
Very few people do.
I mean, I do remember it, and the main theme. Like that's a track that pops in my head every now and then. At first, I thought if I was ever going to talk about Olivier Deriviere, it would have been for that game, actually. But we'll take Streets of Rage 4 because he's taken on some bigger projects for sure. But Remember Me was a game, Don't Nod, of course, being the people who would make Life is Strange, the original game, and then Vampire and some more games since then. Tell Me Why and Twin Mirror recently. And then they rebranded actually just recently to Don't Nod, like actually apostrophe T space NOD. That was an interesting story to come across.
That's weird. I don't like that. I don't know why I don't like that.
So in Remember Me, there were moments where the player was like remixing memories in the game and like changing them to have something else happen or uncover some new information. And so it was a score that really got him a lot of attention, and he won an award from the International Film Music Critics Association for Best Original Score for a Video Game or Interactive Media. He has a YouTube channel, and on that channel, he has a video called The Two Fingers Test, where he goes through some of the music that he's composed from his different games to note that, quote, despite all the synth, post-FX, and more that I apply to my music, the core, the substance, the juice of my music are in the melody and the bass, end quote. Basically, he's showing how he can take his two hands, one finger on each, and still have one play the bass, one play the melody on the piano. Like, despite all that, like, it's the melody that we've talked about for all these episodes of, like, back in the day, they really had to have the melody drive the experience. And so he considers himself part of the melody-based composers extinction rebellion. So it's an interesting approach to take, especially these days with more orchestrated pieces. He finds that the best part of composing, the most valuable thing in composing, is the relationships with other people that are built along the way when you're composing for different projects. Because especially when you're working on future projects, he says the most important part is finding the right people to work with. In fact, after we release this episode, one of the latest games he's working on, he's talking about how he'll reveal like who's working on the project. And so it makes me wonder, like, are we going to see like connections with musicians? Will we get a Tina Guo or a Kristen Nygus drop, for this game? So it's interesting to hear that's like really important to him, is like the personal connections in making music today.
I personally just sort of assume that Kristen Nygus is on every video game I play until I don't see her in the credits.
At this point, right? I mean, that's a good point. You can follow him on Twitter at Deriviere. So that's Oderiviere. So Olivier Deriviere's discography includes Obscure and its sequel, Obscure 2. Also 2008's Alone in the Dark. Not the best game, but it's also a game that really brought him to working on bigger and better video games in the industry. There's also Tangled, the video game, which is like the DS version of that movie in video game form. Remember Me was what really took off his career, because then the next project he worked on was Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag Freedom Cry, which was the standalone expansion with Edward Kenway's Quartermaster Adewale. Then there was Supernova, The Techromancer, Get Even, The Council, Vampire, A Plague Tale Innocence also got him some big attention recently. He also composed for Greedfall. That has a sequel coming out in the next couple of years. Wouldn't surprise me if he gets pegged for that one as well. Of course, Streets of Rage 4. And then he has a big 2022 where he composed for Dying Light 2, Stay Human, as well as A Plague Tale sequel, Requiem, which is going to be announcing its specific release date in the next week or so, but it's supposed to be in 2022 at some point.
One of these days, I'm going to have to play A Plague Tale Innocence. I didn't know that was him, honestly.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about that game, but yeah, still have yet to get to it. The soundtrack for Streets of Rage 4, primarily composed by Olivier Deriviere, with the participation of many different folks throughout the game industry, including the return of Yuzo Koshiro, as well as Motohiro Kawashima, Keiji Yamagishi, Yoko Shimomura, Harumi Fujita, Scattle, Das Mortal, XL Middleton, and Groundless Lava. And of course, then the DLC pack that would add music from T. Lopes. The soundtrack is structured so that Deriviere wrote the main primary themes, while each boss fight's theme was written by one of the guest composers. And yeah, you mentioned Yuzo Koshiro, not involved with the project from the start, but he did join in June 2019 after playing a demo of the game at Bit Summit, which is an indie game showcase in Japan. He also cited fan requests and how the game was coming along as his reasons for joining. Also, Hideki Naganuma was originally set to contribute, but he dropped out of the project due to scheduling conflicts before being replaced by Harumi Fujita. The game also includes the ability to switch the soundtrack to that of the original Streets of Rage and Streets of Rage 2, if you really want those original Koshiro compositions. The soundtrack was also released digitally alongside the game on April 30th, 2020 by Brave Wave Productions, and it also got a limited vinyl release produced by Limited Run Games. So we talk up this soundtrack that we highlighted in the Best of 2020. What does it sound like? It's a different mix than we had for our Critical 5 on the Best of 2020, so here we go. We start the first of our critical tracks here with Character Select. The Character Select theme here, composed by Yuzo Koshiro. A great place to have him contribute. Of course, it's the Choose Your Character theme as you're starting the story, but it's also, I think, it's the theme that plays in between missions, like after you get your score and grade. So this theme comes back there for sure. I feel like this is a great place to have Koshiro compose. It's this really fun, bouncy electronic theme that just really gets you going and hyped up. And as they add more instruments, it feels like it has almost like, that 16-bit music composition sensibility to it, but with, great modern instruments to it. And it just sounds a whole lot of fun. It's got some vocal samples in there as well. Just really cool. One that grabs your attention immediately with this soundtrack.
This is by far my favorite song in the game. Just bar none. It is the one I find myself listening to the most often. I remember when we were putting together the Best of 2020, I was listening to this song to be like, all right, so is this one that's going to be on the thing? This is the song that was like, oh, yeah, this is probably in the top 10, huh? And this is the second song on the soundtrack. I really like some of the places that this song goes. there's a lot of variety to this song for a character select screen that you're probably going to be off of in like less than a minute. And it's really cool. I really, really, really like it. I don't know. It's my favorite song of the game.
It's definitely a great one that just sets the tone right away. And yeah, only goes from there because there's a lot of variety on this soundtrack. It continues to the first song that you hear when you're playing the game. Actually, character moving, punching, and kicking. Number 2 on the Critical 5 here. This is They're Back. Another theme composed by Yuzo Koshiro, and it's the first track that plays on stage 1, The Streets. So that kind of electric piano, like kind of getting the same sort of vibe as the character select theme going, carrying that into gameplay. And then again, we're trying some more things, but we're still kind of keeping it, I think, rooted in what the game may have sounded like in the 90s, but just with these instruments and this potential. So before we go any further and branch out and try to make Streets of Rage 4 its own thing musically, let's get Koshiro back in and give him the first track. I think it's a brilliant idea. I love that choice. And man, a lot of people really have good feelings about this one to kind of get you right back into the Streets of Rage flow after so many years.
Yeah, I think I agree. Koshiro doing the first stage feels fitting. And this does feel like 90s-ish. And it does sound a lot different from some of the other stuff you're going to hear in a minute. But it's in a really interesting way where obviously the instrumentation is a lot better. But I could hear this playing on like a Genesis or in an arcade cabinet, honestly.
For sure. Yeah, you can definitely get the instruments adapted to that 16-bit style. But I mean, yeah, gets you kind of right into the action, especially when you're either learning for the first time or you're back, old hat, playing a side-scrolling beat 'em up. I think it's a great track for that.
That and for a track called They're Back,
for sure. Yeah. And especially their characters that are returning from the series as playable. It's a good choice all around. When you heard Yoko Shimomura is contributing a track, though, it had to be here somewhere. We love Yoko Shimomura, and so her contribution is here, number 3 on the Critical 5. That's a great track, too. This is Shiva.
And this song is Shimomura as hell.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The high-pitched violin that kind of weaves in has a big Kingdom Hearts feel to it, right? I also love how much it sounds like Street Fighter. I get big Goken vibes from it, or Ryu Goken, that kind of lineage to it. And of course, Yoko Shimomura with the composing the themes from Street Fighter 2. That lines up. I think just a great contribution here. And Shiva, I believe, is a rival to Axel, if I read my Streets of Rage lore generally correctly. Again, I don't know too much about it, but as the boss fight against Shiva in Stage 6 Chinatown. And so this plays there. And wow, it's a piece that we had on our Best of 2020, not just for it being a Shimomura piece, and it just sounds amazing, but wow, it just hits you with a different feel for sure.
Yeah, it's like I said, you can 100% tell this is Shimomura, because I agree. That violin is so Kingdom Hearts-ish.
Uh-huh.
That's the first thing I think about every time I hear the song. But I never thought about the Street Fighter comparison. I think that's really interesting, and I can actually hear that, yeah. It also feels like it has, like, maybe some parts of Chun-Li, just a little bit.
Sure. I mean, if it's in Chinatown, like, there's that instrumental inspiration for sure.
But yeah, I think this is probably my second favorite. It might be tied with one of the songs that I have on the cutting room floor. But yeah, this is a fantastic piece. And man, I just really like Yoko Shimomura.
Absolutely. Let's get into some of Olivier Deriviere's work, though. And number 4 here on the Critical 5 is one that he seems to highlight if he wanted to pick a track of his own. This one's a good one. It's Rising Up. This piece plays at the beginning of stage 9, Y Tower. So you're starting to progress toward the end game. Because I think there are 12 stages, if I recall correctly. But when you're starting to deal with the Y Syndicate and you're rising up that tower, that kind of makes sense. These titles are really actually cleverly titled. It's a good job creating the soundtrack there. So this one's really neat because this is a piece that Deriviere highlights on his Two Fingers video of how, like, with this piece in particular is one he highlights from Streets of Rage 4, where, like, melody's important, but so is the bass that supports it. And you can keep it simple. You can do a lot of FX work with it, but it's still a really critical part to it. And it's neat to hear, like, taking Streets of Rage as an inspiration, like the original 90s pieces from Koshiro, but kind of modernizing it a bit. You hear a lot of the different synth and like EDM inspirations that also kind of mix into it. This is a really neat one. Fans also seem to really appreciate this one. It's a good one, I think, to pick in the Critical 5 here.
But why does it feel like you're fighting through a haunted house? I don't know why. That's the vibe I get. Genuinely, when I saw the song was titled Rising Up, my brain was like, do you fight zombies?
From the grave?
Streets of Rage 4? Is that a thing?
No, you're just going through goons in a tower.
I don't know why all this makes me think of is like, oh, you're fighting your way through a goofy haunted house. Well, not goofy, because this song is really, really good. Especially like the beat specifically for this song.
It definitely keeps you driving and moving forward. That's definitely a big part of a beat 'em up, is that push forward, and that music's got to inspire you to do that. Absolutely. Another one from Olivier Deriviere, though, wraps up the Critical 5, and this one here is Lift the Ground. Oh, you want to talk about a thumping bass on this one that really keeps you going and pushing. That is definitely here from Deriviere. So this one plays in the middle of stage 11, Airplane. In this part of the stage, you're in a hangar. And then at one point, like, you enter an airplane and it takes off. And so you're like literally going into the sky, into the atmosphere, and things are just being ramped up further. Just a really cool one here. Very, very high energy. You want to compare it to something like, Koshiro's original pieces. Like, oh yeah, those are good for the time, but like, I feel like this is a good endpoint that kind of shows you where that music is going, especially as you get closer and closer to the end game.
Yeah, this song's level of energy is fantastic. I especially kind of like the discordant sort of synths that adds like a lot of tension. I'm glad to hear that it's a plane. So that's what it means by lift the ground.
There you go. See, they're being clever. They're clever.
See, all I think about when I think about the title Lift the Ground is somebody like reaching down to like the asphalt, sticking their hands inside and pulling it up and throwing it at somebody, which is also really cool. And I'm sure there's probably some character in Streets of Rage 4 that can do that. But yeah, no, this is a really, really fantastic song. I'm kind of surprised to find out it doesn't play during a boss fight because it feels very bossish almost.
It does, doesn't it? If it makes you feel any better, I would have thought it's an elevator piece. But yeah, and an airplane taking off is a better fit in that regard. For tracks on the cutting room floor, we actually both have two. And your couple, it's an interesting case. Tell me about them, Joe.
So my first track on the cutting room floor is On Fire. This was another one composed by Olivier Deriviere. Plays in the middle of Stage 5 Underground, apparently kind of in a dive bar or a biker bar or something, which that kind of checks out with the tone that this song sort of gives out. I just really like the rock vibe that this song has, especially later on in the song when it does the dan da 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 dan. I really, really like that part a lot. And then you've got the really heavy bass drum added to it. I don't know. I dig the vibe of this song. I think it fits really well for like a bar fight. So that's good to know that is where it plays.
It's definitely excellent in that regard. And it's notable because this and the other track that you'll show for us here in a bit, those tracks were what was on our Best of 2020 Critical 5. So did some shuffling around based on getting some more research into the game, some fan input. And so what's the other one that made that Critical 5 for Best of 2020?
That other one is An Exhibition. Another one composed by Olivier Deriviere. Plays at the beginning of Stage 8 Art Gallery, which is why it's called An Exhibition. Okay, that makes sense. I kind of like this song because it feels like it has a different vibe from like everything else, because this one, it has an air of fanciness to it almost, which makes sense. You're at a museum. An art gallery specifically. And I don't know, I especially like the intro of the song. I think it's fantastic and really like gets the blood pumping, but the whole thing, especially that hi-hat, the hi-hat's really fun.
I feel like it's really interesting that they got T. Lopes to contribute for the DLC when this sounds like a T. Lopes piece, in my opinion.
Oh, it very much does, yes.
Yeah, so it's a neat little kind of crossover there to like a similar composer's vibe, but yeah, it's Deriviere composing, as he also does compose these two tracks that I have on the cutting room floor. The first of these is Call the Cops. When you talk about like, effects processing and all that for these music tracks here, if you're in a police precinct as you are at the start of Stage 2 where this piece plays, what do you got to work with? You got to work with a siren, of course. The police siren going here, like really neat to hear what's being worked here. And then the heavy, the driving beat again, it's just so critical for, I feel like, a Streets of Rage, a beat 'em up game. You got to have that driving pace to it. But I feel like this is another fan favorite, and really the siren sampling here is just the coolest, and really hearing Deriviere take his spin on it. Especially when it's, him trying to break away a little bit from Koshiro's work, and it's like him really pushing that. But here's level 2, stage 2. Like, this is where it starts to get pushed forward.
Yeah, the siren sampling is really, really neat in this song. I do like this sort of more urban feeling that this song has, even more so than like any of the other songs we talked about. And I think it fits the idea of the police precinct in a city where Streets of Rage is taking place very well.
100%. The other one I have here on the cutting room floor, this is The Storm Boat. This piece plays at the beginning of Stage 3, Cargo Ship. And I feel like it's really fitting because it has like a kind of slower, but almost like a wave sort of feel to it. Like a ship's being rocked a little bit, especially when that beat drops kind of about a minute or so into the piece. Again, a slower paced song here, which I think was interesting to show the variation here. Kind of like some darker tones going here, kind of like involving like a stormy kind of night, I feel like. But this one is a neat one, and another fan favorite up here. Just, I think, good to kind of flesh out the tracks that we show to highlight here for Streets of Rage 4.
Yeah, this is a really, really neat song. I think it's a good idea to show off some of the slower paced songs, because when you think of beat 'em up, you don't usually think those. Yeah, I kind of really, really dig this song. I think you're right on the money with the whole kind of feels like the boat's rocking and the song's sort of portraying that. It's neat. I like it.
Gotta have a good thump, though. That's a good, important part to it. What will I never forget about Streets of Rage 4? Totally would have been a good game for me to play when it was on Game Pass, but it's like prime example number 1 for me of like, play it when it's there. Don't risk it being taken off the service, because like I don't see myself paying money to play a genre that I usually don't like, but I would have given it a shot. I had it downloaded to my console and everything. Just didn't get around to it. That's real adult stuff. But yeah, that's what I'll always think about it. It's like great music for sure. And it's great to learn about Olivier Deriviere. But oh man, gotta play games when they're available to you.
Yeah, my roommate and I had meant to play through this game, try playing through it co-op, and then we just never got around to it, and same thing, now it's gone. Don't really see myself buying it, because I don't like beat-em-ups all that much, but the soundtrack is A+, and I still go back and listen to it every once in a while, despite having not played it, so that's a good sign.
Speaks to the quality for sure. Well, it's, Monster Farm 2 and Bare Knuckle 4. Oh, wait, those are the names in Japan. Well, we know them as Monster Hunter 2 and Streets of Rage 4.
Oh, said Monster Hunter. Now you did it. Now it's your turn.
I got hit with the curse. Monster Rancher 2 and Streets of Rage 4. Well, it only goes to show. But while the game names may be confusing, these soundtracks certainly are worth covering, and glad we got to here on Original Soundchat. So that will do it for us this week. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with H YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have the podcasts in a feed for you with all the episodes. But we also have a Spotify playlist where if we talk about a game track on this show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to that big playlist. Joe, anything added this week?
So, unsurprisingly, Monster Rancher is not on Spotify, which I don't know why I find that unsurprising, but I do. Meanwhile, Streets of Rage is, obviously, a lot of these tracks are already on there, but, you know, there are some tracks that weren't in the best of 2020, so those will show up soon.
Perfect. And you know, if Monster Rancher 2 had a soundtrack, it'd be a CD-ROM to put into the game, and then you kill it. It dies. Terrible. Well, when you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. You can leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Also, suggestions for games or artists to cover. That'd be some good recommendations to round out our 2022 calendar.
Monster Rancher 2 happens to have been a listener suggestion, which is why it came up.
Well, there you go. I don't think either of us would have gotten to it at any point ever. So that's always great to learn new video game music. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Oh man, next week's going to be a bit of a different episode. I don't even know what it's going to look like yet, but I will be talking about Naofumi Hataya.
Well, if we're talking about a game that comes out on June 23rd, I'll be talking about Spencer Nielsen. All right, to play us out, I feel like if there was one track to highlight, it might be a favorite of Deriviere's, and it's Rising Up. So what were some of the covers of Streets of Rage 4 like, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever? A cover of Rising Up was done by Turtle Rock on YouTube, and it's an 80s rock cover, so it puts a different sort of spin on it, and it sounds really good. So please enjoy that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.